already have our presenter here, Roslynn and Orion. Roslynn Brain McCann is a professor and sustainable community extension specialist at USU. She uses conservation theory, communication techniques, and social marketing tools to foster environmental behavior. She leads a way in community sustainability here at USU right now. Orion Rogers is from a small town called Thompson Springs. He says where dog population outnumber the human population. 40 is human or people, I guess. He earned his BS and MS both in geology from University of Utah. We still like that. For past 12 years, Orion has worked in the field of environmental health and currently serves as environmental health director for Southeast Utah Health Department. So with that, it's all over to you guys. Feel free to share your presentation screen. I'll be in the background.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks for the introductions. And we're excited to be here. We would love to see more of these systems adopted in Utah. And so we'll share with you some of the history, some ins and outs of the code, and hopefully we'll walk away with some new skills, and we'll go over what those will be at the start of the presentation. So I'll go ahead and share my slides. Hopefully when I do so, you'll still be able to see Orion and I as well as the slides. Okay, so using Greywater, also referred to commonly as gray water with an E or gray water with an A and a space between, all are correct. They're just spelled, the term is spelled differently in different states. And we're going to explore how to use these systems legally and effectively in Utah landscapes. I'm very excited to have Orion Rogers, representing the Southeast Utah Health Department, presenting with me in this presentation. And as Chantel mentioned, I'm a professor at Utah State University in Sustainable Communities. I've been with the university now for, 13, 14 years. So started in 2011, and I'm in the Department of Environment and Society. I also am very excited to have the first legal residential graywater system in the state of Utah. And the picture on this cover slide shows some of the plants growing in that graywater system that's watered with my shower water and my laundry as well. So we'll go into how that system works in today's presentation. Orion, you want to say anything else as we get started, or move on?
No, I think we can just dig into it.
Okay, let's do it. So our goal we co-developed is to have you be able to identify key steps to install graywater systems in Utah and how to advocate for more graywater systems at the local level. So like we said, we'd love to see more of these systems in place in Utah. Here's a picture of the earthworks of my graywater system, part of the basin there, showing one of the outlets with that irrigation box over that, and then you can see the water deep in the basin and the planting around it. If I could turn back the clock, I would plant that at this time tiny cherry tree you can see beside the box further back, because wow, does it like to hog the water coming out of that graywater system, and it's huge now. Okay, so when you walk away from this talk, we're hoping that you'll be able to articulate what graywater is, list major aspects of Utah's code. Of course, you won't memorize the code, but maybe some major parts that are important to know about our code in Utah, which was revised in 2020 and simplified, made much more accessible for people right in the peak of the pandemic. And for you to be able to describe benefits and drawbacks of graywater systems based on our experience, and visualize a branch drain system, which is what my system is in my household, recall major best management practices, and be a local graywater leader. So with that, I'll pass it over to Orion here to talk some about the graywater code.
All right. So within the health department, we are charged with regulating on-site wastewater systems, and graywater systems fall into that regulation. So there's an R317-4, which is on-site wastewater systems. Most of you are going to know of them as being called septic systems, but graywater systems are quite a bit different from that. With the graywater system, and we'll talk about it more, what fixtures can go out there and whatnot, but graywater is a way to divert some of the water that would normally be going into municipal sewer system. We can talk about septic systems later if we want to, but so that regulation falls into place. When I first started at the health department. The first time Roz showed up in my office and told me she wanted to do Greywater, I told her that that was a dumb idea because the state Greywater code was terrible at the time. And essentially, sometime eons ago, it was essentially health departments and the state DEQ, Division of Environmental Quality, were told to write a Greywater rule. And so whoever it was way back when wrote this Greywater rule that was so restrictive, nobody ever bothered using it. And so after having chats with Roz and Jeff Adams, one of our other colleagues that we've worked on this, I took it to the state to propose the idea of changing that rule, and then all of the other health departments, and as well as mine, as well as the state DEQ, Division of Water Quality specifically, got together and rewrote the Greywater rule to make it more accessible and feasible for people to actually be able to do it. And so I think that's probably enough background on that for this slide. We'll go into more of it, I guess. So Greywater specifically in Utah and many other places is just defined as water coming from the bathroom faucet, laundry facilities, showers, and bathtubs. And there's more slides that kind of talk about this, but you'll notice that the kitchen faucet is missing, and that's because of the higher expected bacterial loads that would be going through that from food wastes and other such things. Go ahead, Roz.
Oh yeah, sure. So yeah, I'll just, before I move into some term definitions, say that Orion did lead the charge, which was incredible in helping to revise that state code. And after several years, it was a many-year process. It was approved in 2020, I believe was the year. And that allows for these gravity-fed systems as opposed to these more complicated systems in the previous code requiring tanks and pumps and engineered plans and other things. So we'll go more into that as well as we dive deeper into what these systems look like and how they work. So just to get our terms straight, to get started here, let's differentiate Greywater from clear water. So clear water includes water sources like filling up or heating up your water to wash dishes in the kitchen sink. So while you're waiting for that water to heat up, many people, including myself, will fill up a container to water plants with. And so I do that often, warm my kitchen warm up water and use that for watering plants or other uses. And there's air conditioning drip also counts as clear water. And so this is water that has not come into contact with contaminants, and it's generally clean enough to be diverted or reused with minimal treatment, as the slide says. Black water is not allowed in our Greywater systems, and that includes contaminants such as human waste or other high-strength organic contaminants, including high counts of E. coli. So that includes the toilet, kitchen sink, dishwasher discharge, soiled diaper laundry water. So that's when your laundry could be used for Greywater, but also depends on what you're washing and what chemicals you're using, whether it needs to go to your septic or sewer system. And photo lab sink water and water softener water are considered black water in the state of Utah. Rainwater is precipitation collected directly from a roof or other catchment surface before it hits the ground or mixes with runoff. And I harvest rainwater at my house. This is actually a picture of my tank. It's 750 gallons. You can legally harvest without a special permit in the state of Utah up to 2,500 gallons in above or below ground tanks at a time. So that doesn't mean per year. It means you could fill up 2,500 gallons worth, use it, and then reuse or refill that up in the next rain event and use it again. So I love my rain tank. It's pretty full right now from the last couple of rains we've had in Moab, and I'll be using that to water various fruit trees and other shade trees in my backyard. So Utah Code 73-3-1.5, not that you need to remember that, but in case you want to look it up and make note of that, covers rainwater collection rights and registration. And like I said, up to 2,500 gallons, and is approved for outdoor irrigation and non-potable water uses in the state of Utah. Stormwater runoff is runoff that flows over land or impervious surfaces. We use stormwater runoff on the previous Moab campus, which is now the Free Health Clinic. We cut curbs and put in an indented basin so that the parking lot runoff runs into indented basins to grow shade trees for the parking lot. So this system is working in a more synchronous way than if we had a curb cutting off all that water flow from the stormwater system and then needed to put in municipal water to supplementally water those trees. So we have shade trees growing in the parking lot that are on zero irrigation. They just depend on parking lot runoff with curb cuts and indented basins.
I'll add to that. We also installed a similar type system that, well, for the stormwater here at the health department in Moab, that also went through curb cuts, went into these basins and all that. And we didn't have to water for like the last 3 years, but now we got a new road in front of the building and most of it got torn out. So
yes, that was unfortunate. I saw that.
So we're gonna have to start over. But anyway,
yeah.
got the city on board.
Yeah, we'll have to redesign that space at some point. So yeah, so now that we've had our terms straight, let's go into the potential of Greywater. So if we look at the average indoor household use by fixture, this is a really, to me, impactful image because it's showing in America, this is on average what households are using by fixture in the house. So here they combine faucet, which is unfortunate. So I don't know which faucet they're talking about, if it's bathroom, kitchen, or both. So we'll just omit that for the sake of the conversation. If we just include the shower, clothes washer, and bath on there, you can see it's over 50 gallons per household per day. So this is a huge water harvesting potential into our landscapes if we had a Greywater system installed. So just to show you some of the potential there. So yeah, just some more about the rule, and I'll pass it to Ryan for this.
All right, so in the process of writing the rule, when I went into it, I essentially just wanted to write the rule specifically to gravity-fed Greywater systems that like Roz has, because it's a lot simpler. There's a lot less complicated things. So there was some hesitation amongst other regulators on only going that direction, as well as, other uses. So we identified the tier 1 versus the tier 2. Tier 1 are those gravity systems. It's supposed to be super simple, super easy, and very little maintenance. Whereas a tier 2 system could be used in a multifamily situation or a commercial situation, or honestly on any residential home if you really wanted to. But I don't know why you'd want to have that extra complication. And in this case, one of the biggest fights to get for the tier 1 is lots of several of the other regulators were very insistent on having a tank before it went out to the landscape. Luckily, we were able to compromise with them and get this tier 1, tier 2. So a tier 2 is going to have a surge tank. Think of it kind of like a mini septic tank. And then it's going to have some sort of treatment, drip irrigation. So these can be kind of neat in some ways if you need to pressurize to get to somewhere. But typically there's pumps, there's all this other stuff. And really the best application I would like to see a tier 2 go into would be like a hotel with lots of landscaping, something like that. And if you look at a hotel, for instance, like you wouldn't be able to use all of the water to water the landscape for the hotel. Like there's just not enough landscape. But if in a development like that, you could take all the showers from the first floor and just divert that water to be used in a Greywater system, a tier 2 would be an excellent option in that case. But back to the tier 1, this is what most folks would want to put on a regular house. It's especially easy if you're doing it on a new build, but existing homes could be retrofitted, especially if you have a shower on an exterior wall or something like that. But I think we'll get further into that as we move forward. Last bullet point here is one thing that was kind of new for putting into code was to put in an appendix with best management practices. Like typically as regulators and in regulatory rules, you're not going to have these are the things you should do. It's more of these are the things you have to do. But in this particular rule, we added some stuff at the end for like best types of trees, best types of detergents, that kind of stuff. And just to give some guidance on what really should and should not be discharged through these systems.
Yeah, and that's really helpful to have as a homeowner to see what's recommended for products, and a lot of the focus with what products to use. I get asked that a lot with my system is low salt products. And I like to tell people if it's harmful for your skin and your bacteria in your body, then it's probably harmful for your soil as well. So just as we go through the presentation, the saga of my cherry tree beside that outlet, this is that same cherry tree that I had planted when I put the system in back in, 2015, so 10 years ago. And it's much larger than this now, but this is maybe it's a teenager at this point in the picture. So, okay, moving on.
Okay, so we're speaking specifically to the tier 1 type system that I mentioned before, which, if I remember right, is just these branch drain gravity systems that you're talking about. But in order to put them in, we need to determine what our soil types are, which is going to dictate the size of the basin necessary to hold the expected water to go out. I mean, a clay is going to take the water on much slower than a sand, and really the sweet spots, if you have nice loamy sand or loamy soils, like Roz has here in this picture, that's kind of ideal. So anyway, the total square footage of the basin is determined by the amount of water being discharged, as well as the soil type, and that changes your size there, as well as many other aspects of the design. One of the other parts that we have to do is there needs to be a way to divert from to either your sewer system or your septic system, in the case that you're doing that load of non-disposable diapers, or you need to do a bleach load or something that's going to have, and I'm just speaking specifically to laundry right now, but like if you're going to be putting something in the water that you don't want to go out to your landscape, there needs to be a way to go in between. That can be accomplished in a number of ways. Roz has a 3-way diverter valve in hers. If I have one around here somewhere, I would have held it up, but I forgot. But another way to do it is like behind your laundry machine, you can put a second standpipe and then just move that, crook-necked hose that comes off the back of your washer from one pipe to the other, depending on where is appropriate for that laundry to drain to at that particular time. Pipe sizing and slopes of the pipes and all of that are things that have to be taken into consideration. If the pipe isn't going downhill, your water is going to stay in the house. So that's never good. And then also, based on the design of the system, it's going to determine the number of outlets, the number of mulch shields. We haven't really defined mulch shields, but what that's referring to is back to that irrigation box that Roz was pointing out earlier in the presentation. We've put in a couple of systems where it was just a 5-gallon bucket, but there has to be a 5-gallon capacity to whatever that outlet is, or the mulch shield that the outlet goes into, and essentially that protects your pipe from getting mulch up in it and that sort of thing, and it just gives a good place. And it also adds for surge capacity. Like if you dump a whole bathtub, you're going to need a place for that water to go before it has a chance to absorb into the soil. Somebody mentioned in the chat earlier that they were wishing that we could water our lawns with it. Unfortunately, that isn't something that could be done in the normal spray type application of water to a lawn, because there's required to have a minimum of 6 inches of cover over essentially the bottom of or wherever that water is being discharged. In this case, it goes into that mulch shield. It's going to the bottom of the basin, you can see there. And so there has to be 6 inches of cover in these mulch basins. It's going to be mulch that's your cover. If you're doing drip irrigation or something like that off of one of those tier 2 systems, that would be, there'd have to be 6 inches of water over your not water, 6 inches of soil or other over the top of your discharge piping for drip irrigation. So a lot of that comes back to the worry about humans' interaction with the water that's being discharged, if there was a high bacterial load or anything else, and worries of other with spray irrigation. One of the worries is aerosolizing some sort of pathogen, and that's where some of those worries come up. Sometimes they may seem a little extreme to be worried that much about it when we have like natural bodies of water that are full of bacteria and whatnot, but we're health departments and we tend to be a little more conservative with stuff like that. So yeah, I think that's the gist of that. So
I'll just point out the Terra Sophia logo. Jeff Adams did help with the input on some of this information, and so just giving credit there. That's his company. And this picture is actually, it looks like it could be my system. When you said that, I was like, oh yeah, I can see how you thought that was my basin. It's actually from a system over on Locust Lane in Moab. So another homeowner that's put a Greywater system in there. That, you know the system, Orion.
Yeah, I know
Okay.
what system, and little did she know she'd work for me someday in the future.
Yeah,
So,
that's right. So yeah,
yeah,
go ahead.
okay. So this is kind of more of like a learning moment in a way. So, well, these are design considerations. So lot size and home design are super important when you're thinking about doing Greywater on a new build. Um, we have a really amazing low income housing project in Moab called Arroyo Crossing, and I've learned a lot from that one because it's a combination of stuff from the Housing Authority of Utah as well as a local nonprofit called Community Rebuilds, and so these homes are like it's in a land trust, and we were really excited to put in like 300 Greywater systems, and then it turns out that the lot sizes were too small to be able to fit them. And so it's something that we kind of figured out along the way because that's where this lot size and home design come in. So even with a relatively small home on a small lot, part of our regulations are that the water has to be discharged a certain distance, 5 feet from the foundation of the home for pretty obvious reasons. You don't want your home sinking, but also you're not allowed to impact your neighbor. So the discharge is supposed to happen 5 feet from the neighboring property, and the area to put the basins in on some of these properties, there was only 10 feet to work with. So we had exactly 0 space to put one in. And so that was a little unfortunate on those, but something to be learned, and maybe changes to the rule can happen in the future to maybe reduce those setback distances. But that was like a really important learning lesson for lot size and home design being a major consideration when it comes to putting one of these in. And then integration with other landscape features and uses, like on like Roz's house, for instance, the basins are oversized because the slope of her roof feeds rainwater directly into those basins. So those basins had to be oversized to accommodate that additional rainwater when it hits them. Elevations and grading, if you've got steep slopes or shallow slopes, or one of the big, really important things with the Greywater for the elevation of the discharge pipe coming from the home, where the Greywater comes out, needs to be as close to surface as possible, because otherwise, if it comes out at frost depth, you're looking at 25, 26 inches, maybe more, depending on where you're at in the state, which means by the time you get to a mulch basin, you're going to have a 3 or 4 foot deep hole. And that does not promote good, plant growth and all of that. And so something I've worked with building departments on and stuff is we were able, sewer has to come out in Moab at 26 inches deep. But because we have this secondary backup diversion valve, or being able to move those, the hose on the back of the laundry machine, we were able to, because there's a secondary means of frost protection, the discharge pipe coming from the house can come out at or near grade. And so that's one of the other really most important elevations to consider. We've kind of talked about the water sources already, unless Ross had something else in mind on that, but essentially paying attention to what water you're discharging and when it's appropriate. Not really my end of the thing, but different plants need different water, and planting those plants closer or further away from your points of discharge, those mulch shields, is something to take into consideration. That's something we've relied very heavily on Terra Sophia and other landscape people that know plants to design the landscape around that mulch basin itself. And yeah, that kind of wraps that up. And it's all this plan design.
Yeah.
And of
Yeah,
course, interior
so-
design. Yeah, the interior design part, if you put the bathroom in the middle of the house, it's going to be by the middle or the far side of the house. Like by the time you have appropriate slopes to exit the home, sometimes you'll be far below grade. So those are considerations. So exterior walls are ideal with enough yard on the side to build something.
That's a really good point. Yeah, because with the gravity fed system, you're looking at a 2% or so grade to keep that water moving by gravity out to the landscape, so it's not backfilling into your house. And so you want to make sure that the least amount of distance from that three-way valve to your landscape, the better, because otherwise your pipe is going to be way too deep down. And mine's right beside my washing machine. And I do have a porch that it goes under as well. You'll probably see one of these pictures coming up. So this is a picture from my Greywater system, and just thinking through some of the benefits that I've observed. We've got additional benefits listed in our fact sheet, and all that. One of the last slides, there's a QR code you can scan to access that fact sheet and read about Utah's code and what you can do to install that at your own residence. So these Greywater systems produce dark, intensely rich soil matter, and it's so effective that it does break down my mulch every 2 to 3, sometimes 4 years. I've had the system, like I said, for 10 years, and it's every couple to 3 years on average that I have to clean out the system. And why I have to do that is because as the mulch starts to break down, it doesn't allow that water to travel as efficiently throughout the basin. And so I want that water to spread to more plants than just the cherry tree. That's obviously very happy on that outlet. So I have 4 outlets in my branch drain system. And so 2 go to this basin you see in that picture with the wheelbarrow there. And then 2 outlets are in the far basin, which is to the west. And that is watering mainly a Utah giant cherry and a peach as well. And so this front basin has a Lapin's cherry and a nectarine. And so I use that rich soil to fertilize plants in my backyard that aren't on the Greywater system. And so that's a benefit that I've seen with my own system. It's a passive watering system. I'm a lazy gardener, I like to say. I'm mainly a perennial gardener and harvest mainly perennial edibles. And I'm also a full-time working mom. And so when I shower, I prefer that water to water my landscape so I don't have to do it. And I don't have to deal with all these parts and timers, et cetera, for an irrigation system in the entire front yard of my house. It's just reliant on me making sure I shower every once in a while and that my kids have a bath. So I love that about that system, that it's hands off as far as the well, pretty minimally hands on, I should say, about watering the landscape. So why I backtrack there for a second is that occasionally, and I mean like once a year, probably get away with every other year if your hair is not as long as mine, to check the junctions in which you have a pipe split. And so if with a branch drain, if that, I mentioned this outlet, this basin has 2 outlets, and so there's a branch that goes in that outlet, and at that juncture you want to be able to, you can access in there to see if any hair accumulation has happened or any buildup, and you can reach down and pull that out. I'll show you what that looks like in a later slide. Water bill savings, of course, water is pretty cheap in Utah. I don't know if that'll always be the case, so at least I like to know that there's a dual benefit, right? I don't feel as guilty having a normal length shower because it is watering the edibles of my front yard. And mentioned the healthy soil already, and that's the psychological well-being as well. So you're feeling great about the fact that you're using that water for secondary sources. And there's evidence to show that these Greywater systems do help with groundwater recharge, according to the Global Water Group, and that we see an average decline in municipal water dependence by 16 to 45% for households with Greywater systems installed. Some drawbacks include what Orion said about affordable housing. So the lot size problem. So if you have an extremely small lot, then with the setbacks, you might not be able to put the system in at all. And some other drawbacks, and Orion, feel free to plug in at any point here, but health department opt-in. And so the system, we would hope the code, when it got put through, would be an opt-out where the health departments were automatically opted in and they had to opt out, but it was passed with an opt-in system, meaning that your local health department needs to opt in to approve Greywater systems. Do you want to say anything else about that part, Orion?
Yeah, so yeah, the health departments have to opt in to administer this rule. There's a few other rules out there like that. But the process is pretty simple. It's pretty much, there's a section in the code that says that your health department can handle this additional workload and will administer the rule. And so I was obviously the first to opt in. A few others have, and a couple others are talking about it. But there are some health departments that just are they're not ready for it, I guess. But so working directly with your local health department to opt into the system is a really important start to being able to do these systems throughout the
My
state.
understanding too, Orion, is that some of the health departments feel like there's not enough demand for it. So the more that they hear from people about wanting these systems, the more likely they will be to move to opt in to approve them.
Yeah, and that's very true. It seems like there hasn't been enough education to builders and plumbers, and we'll talk about that more. But yeah, just getting some of those professionals that would be designing something like this to propose it to new owners or existing owners as an option as part of standard design can do a lot to be able to promote these further throughout the state.
Yeah, and so we were just got into plumbers a little bit. So it would be great to see some more professional development for plumbers. So I know a homeowner in Moab who has quoted several $1,000s for their Greywater system, which is absurd given the cost of the parts. And so I just think it would really help to have a specific professional development that plumbers could go through to learn how to put these systems in and how cost effective they can actually be. You're talking a 3-way valve, which is, at the time I bought my Jandy valve was $60, and then a couple 2-inch pipes and some irrigation boxes. So there's the cost to the homeowner, even though it is much less expensive than the previous code required for all the different parts of a tank, et cetera. You don't need that anymore. It is still an added cost as you're building the house. And also there's a need for some education for the homeowner. So what products can they use and which outlets can go into the Greywater system, et cetera. And then also to understand the differences between types of system, like a branch drain or a laundry to landscape is another type of system where you're using the pump of the washing machine to put pressure out the Greywater system. And I've seen that used especially in other states like Arizona, for example.
Yeah, I'll just add one other thing on the homeowner cost. Like sometimes it's a sticker shock because you get a bad quote or something like that. But what I've seen on a number of the homes in that development that I mentioned earlier that did have large enough lots was just what we worked with some of those to do is just at least stub the home out. So at least get a pipe going to the exterior, cap it off. And with those homes, we just required that they sign an affidavit saying that they wouldn't install anything outside of the home without getting a permit with us. Because those homeowners were originally like gung-ho to put in this system outside. And by the time they got done with their owner builds, like sweat equity sort of things, by the time they got close to their certificate of occupancy, they just couldn't handle this extra few $100 or whatever. So they wanted to postpone that till later and then address their landscape. So that's another part of it. So I don't know if we addressed the stubbing out elsewhere in this presentation, but stubbing out is a really good viable option that's inexpensive to at least make it possible for a home to do this in the future.
I will just say that if you do stub out for a system in the future, just know that a Greywater system is not effective unless you're actually pulling it to the landscape. So keep that in mind as you stub it out to eventually pull it out to the landscape from the house, and don't keep it as a stub out. Otherwise, there's no sense having it at all. Okay, so what's in a branch drain system? So there's a couple main components for that. You have your source, which is of course the outlet. So for my system, it's the washing machine and the bathtub and shower, which are the same thing. I didn't pull my bathroom sink. If I could turn back the clock, I would. At the time, I wasn't sure I was going to have kids, and my husband and I are pretty water wise, and we thought it would be too high of a salt load in that just from brushing our teeth. But now we have children, and we would change that if we could. So 3-way valve is another component we've talked about a handful of times. I've got a picture somewhere in here. Pipes and fittings are needed. Flow splitters are needed. Your discharge area, so your basin and that sized appropriately. The mulch shield. This picture of this Greywater system, I'm not sure which system this is. It's just a picture that I had for a very long time. These outlets are not sized large enough for Utah. So these are too small for an outlet. You want at least the 5-gallon bucket size, as Orion said, are larger, and having mulch over top, and then your vegetation planned appropriately.
And to clarify there a little bit, the reason that those are required to be 5 gallons now versus those ones that you can see there that are probably gallon and a half is purely based on observations made at Roz's system. They weren't functioning quite right, but when she made changes to her system and added 5-gallon mulch shields, things started working better. So we actually had like on-hands experience about changing that state rule through personal observations. So
yeah, I'm really glad that those were increased, because what happens is with those smaller gallon or so size outlets, the root systems of plants will grow around that. And even though you do little half moon outlets around the bottom to allow that water to flow out, if you release a bathtub in there, it's gonna, especially if there's any blockage to those outlets at the bottom, then that water is just going to fill up immediately in that and overflow. And what the health department doesn't want is pooled gray water, because that's when you're breeding bacteria and it becomes a potential health concern. So you want that to be infiltrating in the soil as best and quickly as possible. Did you want to talk about this image, Orion?
yeah, I can talk about it, but I'll also add to that, like, aside from all the stuff I mentioned before about the pooled water and human interaction and stuff, one of the other worries is creating places for mosquitoes to breed and causing other vector issues. So also pooled water, cockroaches, all sorts of fun stuff that nobody wants around their house. So especially when we're building something that is kind of almost a pest harbor, it could be a pest harborage if the water wasn't taken care of properly. So yeah, this is a pretty simple system. I don't think anybody can see my mouse, or can you?
No.
No, that's fine. Anyway, you see the laundry machine there. It goes up to that standpipe like we were talking about before, going directly out to these trees through the branch drain system. Like this does not show that secondary pipe, but it'll essentially just be a second one of those in the picture, one going to the branch drain, one going to sewer. Oh, I guess people
Actually,
can't
we
see.
can see this mouse. So if you move
Oh,
it,
cool.
you can see it. Yeah.
All right, so yeah, so your water is going to come out here. It's going to come down to a flow splitter. The flow splitter is there. It does not show in here that you need a little access there. That'll be shown in a different slide.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's missing the access in here.
Yeah, but in a perfect world, that's essentially just a T, or that's a 4-way coupling in that case. And that's going to be set nice and level so that you're going to get an equal flow to each of your basins. You could, in theory, bias that in one direction or another if one basin was larger than the other, but we don't need to get into that. That can be deeper stuff. And then that comes out. This is also missing those mulch shields, but those would be right there. And you'll notice that the bottom of the basin, it's not really to scale, but that pipe needs to discharge 6 inches above the bottom of that basin. And that's for multiple reasons. Part of it is it's in that mulch shield. And if you've got your pipe up 6 inches, pests aren't going to be as readily able to get up and go back into your plumbing and potentially into your home, as well as it helps to prevent root intrusion into the discharge pipe itself, causing blockages or backups or things like that.
That's why the air gap that we were mentioning earlier. Yeah, so we'll just spend a couple more minutes and mainly show some pictures. And I want to just talk first before that happens about the operations and maintenance of the systems. If you're putting this in and then you're using it, how do you maintain it over time? That's a picture I mentioned that was coming. So this is my Greywater system as it comes out from under my porch. And if I move the irrigation box cover off of this split in my pipe, it does a direct split between both basins, then I can just untwist this. We just drilled a hole into the split, and then we put a cap on there, and I can pull that or untwist that and then put my finger in there and pull out any hair that's gotten into the systems. So that's that first bullet of inspecting discharge outlets and this flow splitter for clogging. This Orion already mentioned the pooling and runoff and why that was a problem. And as you need to have a 3-way valve that you can turn to the sewer system, and maintaining that wood mulch, you want to check and see how compacted it's getting as that water is in your system and how much it's broken down. Because once it gets to a point where it's really compacted or broken down, then you'll want to use that as effective soil somewhere else, and then put some more mulch in the system, fresh mulch. And yeah, making sure that you are taking care of your plants for their specific needs. So I tried to put it in the more water intensive plants closer to the outlets, and then more desert style plants further away. And you'll see that in a picture in a second. And then this last point, the other information is deemed appropriate per system. Do you want to mention about that, Orion?
Actually kind of drawing a blank a little bit on the other stuff that would be required. It's just going to be very specific to your to whatever you're trying to do. So that's where different aspects of the rule comes in versus other aspects of the rules. And so when somebody applies for a building permit and then they want to do a Greywater system, we're going to look very closely at what exactly the homeowner is wanting to do, what the contractor is telling us, and so on and so forth. And then that may or may not kick in more or less regulations depending on what it is. And yeah, I think that explains it well.
Okay, so here we go with some pictures of systems, and then we'll get into some Q&A. This is a Jandy valve. Mine's black, but it's the same. It says Jandy valve as well. You can look at any type of three-way valve. So why there's 3 different outlets. One is the inlet right from your bathtub shower. And then the other 2, one is going to sewer and one's going to landscape. And so my Jandy valve, where my bath water comes in, this is a picture of my floor as the house is being built with that irrigation box and the top there. I lift that top up beside my washing machine. I don't have a dryer, so that I have a space there. And by doing that, I'm able to go in and turn that Jandy valve to sewer as I need, and then back to landscape. And that shows the split there and being able to access that with the same cap as I mentioned before in the last slide.
Yeah, and just one clarification, Jandy is a brand.
That's right.
Technically, but I don't think there's other ways to valve this, but we found that those are the most simple at this point. So, and you also notice, and it's kind of hard to tell, some of the purple that you see in these pipes is actually just the glue and the and whatnot, but these pipes are required to be painted or purple to identify them as being non-potable.
Yeah. This is my system going at my house. And so looking at the different plant needs, thinking about this is like the basin, you have the middle of that indented area, the bench is in between, and the upland where you'd plant less water dependent plants. And so thinking about my plant scheme that way as the landscaping went in. Here you can see that purple pipe that Orion was talking about. My 1 gallon outlet, which we discovered over time was too small in that west basin, which is beside the peach tree at the time. This is a picture I just took when Orion was at my house the other day of that same peach tree. And so you can see how much it's grown in the last handful of years. And I've got peaches on there right now. They're still green, so it's kind of hard to see, but you might spot a peach or 2 on that tree. And so that's just doing really well with no supplemental water. It's just all from the Greywater system. And so here's some other pictures of the Greywater system. Again, there's that Lapin's cherry, and then just various plants I have around there. So that's more in the basin area. And then up on the bench, I've got different flowering plants. And then away in the drier zone, I've got things like desert willow, for example. And so there's the desert willow there in the foreground. You can see right here. And then again, the same basin that's all Greywater fed in those 2 different basins, one here and then one over here. So the pipe comes out over here underneath the porch, and that's where that cap is, where I can access the pipe as I need, and then it splits into this space. And you can see actually the top of that irrigation box there. It's now fully covered in mulch, but here it's exposed, and then the other pipe goes over in this direction, then splits into 2 here. And then I just took this as well yesterday or the day before. And so the trees now are taller than my house. And so this is the Utah giant cherries over here, the Lapin's cherries over here. Here's the nectarine, and then the peach is right in that background back here. So they're just thriving on just the Greywater outlets. And then to wrap everything up, if you want to get out your device and take a picture or scan, shows you how often I use QR codes myself, but if you want to capture that QR code and access our fact sheet on Greywater systems, Ryan was a co-author on the original main writing of this, and then we did a couple updates as well. And so you can see them there in the co-author list. And that goes through a lot of what we talked about in today's presentation. And I'll show you that online here just to show you what that looks like. And with saying thanks for your attention. And that's our email addresses if you want to capture that in the picture or anything. And I'll just, like I mentioned, show you what these system or this fact sheet looks like. So if you go to the link that took you to, it looks like this. And you can read through the advantages and how this works in Utah, components, what about your system, why do Greywater, different resources. But then at the very bottom, if you just want to download the PDF that looks like the one that I had in that picture, then you click that button and that has the PDF version of that same fact sheet. So that's available for you all if you want to access that. So with that, we'll just go into some Q&A and yeah, happy to answer whatever questions you have.
Thanks, Ross and Orion. That was a wonderful presentation. We do have some Q&As on the chat and on the Q&A box both. So let's get started with the Q&A box. The first one from Sharon is, how do I encourage my city to use that type of design for parking lots and new builds in the city to plant trees without installing irrigation? So how can the system be used in the park strips, or how it can be encouraged for the cities?
Well, I'm guessing that this is specifically to the rainwater runoff when we were talking about that. And I think that you would just need to go talk to your
City.
go talk to the city, go talk to people there. Because really it doesn't change anything. There's no regulations really behind that rainwater runoff that I'm aware of. Like here at the health department, we simply just cut into the curb, and we happen to have a parking lot that sloped directly toward a curb, and there was landscaping beyond it. There used to be turf. We were able to make those swales and let the water fill up there. As for talking a city into doing it, I don't know, because even Moab being Moab, we just had a whole bunch of new irrigation put in for new landscape throughout many of the new boulevards and stuff that we have here on some of our parking areas.
Yeah, without curb cuts. But I have seen Logan, there's areas of Logan, Utah that have curb cuts already installed. And so there's other areas of the state where this is happening. And I think it would be worth a conversation and just presenting some pictures of this working in other areas of the state. I'm happy to share any pictures from the Free Health Clinic site, the Old Moab campus, if that's helpful. And it's really easy to put these in, and very little, I haven't seen any risk at all to having those installed. And so, and we could all use more shade on our streets, that's for sure.
Yes. The next one is from Gary. Does Utah have any regulation for certified Greywater designer installer? Do we need certified people to install this system?
So there does have to be a design by a certified person. The certified person has to do the design. Builders, property owners can do the install themselves, or you can use a licensed plumber in other situations. The certification is to do the install of Greywater systems as part of the Utah on-site wastewater training program that's also hosted through USU. I'm actually going to my recertification tomorrow up in Ogden. But anyway, so yes, you have to be certified, but at the same time, you're going to learn a lot more than you ever wanted to know about septic systems at the same time. This is a touch point that I wanted to make earlier. Septic systems, Greywater systems aren't great are not really a good thing for a septic system, because a septic system needs a certain amount of water, and diverting that away can increase the concentration of septic that's going out of a septic tank, which isn't great. That being said, there are some really fancy septic designs, if we want to spend a lot of money, where we could use 100% of the water discharged from a home for subsurface drip irrigation.
Could you use a sump pump for a Greywater source, like pumping it out? If someone has like their washer in the basement, and that's where it's coming out from, how do you use that on the irrigation system?
That would probably need to be a tier 2 type system that's going to go up to some sort of a holding tank. And then from that holding tank, the holding tank could gravity out of it directly to your system. There is the worry of increased bacteriologic growth within that tank. So having that tank turn over frequently would probably be your best management there. So not sizing that tank too large or too small would be important, but it certainly could be done in the design.
Yeah, and so a laundry to landscape system relies on that washing machine pump pressure to do that. And there's a great description of that in this book, creating an oasis with Greywater. Our local library, Grant County Library, has this. I'm not sure if yours will, but if not, I'm sure they could order it in. This is another incredible book that's even newer. That's this Greywater Green Landscape. And so that's another one that you could use to reference as you're looking at putting in a Greywater system. And so both of them are very thorough and go into depth about how great these systems are, why they work, and how they work. So.
Yeah. But the laundry machine's pump itself, I don't believe would have enough pressure to come out of a basement and up. So an additional sump of some sort would be necessary.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Are there any further educations or certification for Greywater that you know of?
Other than the certification I mentioned earlier, not for Utah, no, but I think that there's probably, to be honest, better resources out there for training to really understand these. I can't speak to which ones specifically, but that certification through that is taught by USU, but is the one that's allowed by the state of Utah, barely touches on Greywater.
When I first started pestering Orion for a Greywater system, I had just come back from the course that I plugged a link into the chat with the watershed management group. They're based out of Tucson, Arizona. I took the certification in New Mexico, but it was a water harvesting certification. And that's when I learned how to install these branch drain systems. And we retrofitted with someone's crawl space in their house and put a branch drain system in. And I was so excited about it. I was currently in the early phases of building my own house and wanted to put the system in as well. And so that's one that is spectacular. I really enjoyed taking that, and it is a commitment though of a week or so that you're committing your time to going to, but very well done. You learn about rain tank systems, sizing tanks, Greywater systems, how to size the basins and everything. So the ins and outs of water harvesting.
Thanks so much. I don't think we have anything else, any more questions. So thank you so much again.